She was halfway through stitching the stuffed bear's torn arm when the door creaked open and there he stood silent holding his intake papers with shaking hands. Lena dropped the needle. It clattered on the floor, but she didn't hear it, not over the pounding in her chest, not over his face, and definitely not over the flood of memories crashing into her like a tidal wave. The late night calls, the stolen journals, the voices telling her to trust him when her instincts screamed run the way they sedated her without asking how she felt or why she was really screaming. He was supposed to be gone. New patient, the nurse said casually behind him, flipping through a clipboard. Psych referral, manic history, claims to know someone on staff. Of course he does, Lena thought, her fingers curling instinctively. He knows me too well. His name, Jason Carter, her ex, the man who destroyed her sanity and now wanted her help to fix his own. 12 months ago Lena hadn't even been allowed to hold a pen. Now she was a patient aide in the psychiatric wing where she was once treated. Quiet, dependable, healing in her own way, not cured, never fully, but standing. And now this. Jason didn't speak that first day. He just stared, eyes too alert for someone newly admitted, watching her like he was waiting for her to flinch. Lena didn't, but she didn't sleep that night either. Instead she stayed in the staff break room long after lights out, her notebook open, writing like she used to before therapy became a weapon, before the betrayal. The notebook was hidden in the lining of her tote bag. She'd learned the hard way how they took things from you when you were labeled unwell. She wrote, "He's back and I'm not sure if I want to run, scream, or finish what I started." The next morning the psych nurse paired Lena for arts and coping therapy duty with Jason. "Is this a joke?" she whispered to Dr. Alden. "She's good at de-escalation," the doctor replied calmly, "and he trusts no one." Trust that word again. Jason sat beside her as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't once handed her private drawings to staff who'd used them to classify her as a danger to herself, as if he hadn't written a signed affidavit claiming she was manipulative, borderline delusional, and watched her lose 3 weeks of freedom, as if he wasn't the reason she once woke up restrained to a bed, barely remembering what landed her there. But now he was smiling, that same half-tilted grin. "You look good, Lena." Her hands trembled over the colored pencils. She didn't answer. Instead she asked, "Why are you here?" Jason tilted his head to get better. "I guess." That pause, that flicker, "He's lying." Lena marked it in her mind. Later that week Lena found something taped under the rec room piano, a note folded 3 times in his handwriting. It said, "I never told them everything. You still don't know what they did." Her stomach turned. Was this another trick, or was there truth? Because the worst part of her breakdown wasn't the collapse, it was the confusion, the blurred line between what Jason had caused and what others had enabled. She remembered the way Dr. Reeves smiled too much, the way the medication changed after a private session with Jason. The gaps in her chart. Was there more? And why now? Why come back here of all places? That night Lena hid the note inside her boot and made a decision. If Jason had come to unearth something, so would she, even if it meant going back into the darkness she barely escaped. But the next morning when she tried to ask him about the note, he was gone. Room cleared, patient file locked, no discharge papers. Jason had vanished just like before. Lena opened her locker to grab her coat but found a second note inside. This one wasn't in Jason's handwriting. It read, "We told you not to dig. Some memories stay buried for a reason." Her throat went dry. Someone else was watching her, someone from the inside, and they weren't going to let her find the truth easily. She kept the note pressed flat between the pages of her hidden journal. Then she made a list: Jason, Dr. Reeves, Dr. Alden, Nurse Carver, room 108. The memory of the room came back suddenly. A muffled scream, a hand over her mouth, the scent of antiseptic, and Jason's voice outside the door talking calmly like nothing was wrong. She wasn't supposed to remember it, but she did now, pieces of it anyway, and that terrified her more than anything. She started noticing things: a locked cabinet she was never allowed to access with files that were never updated, a nurse flinching when Lena asked about the night medication logs, a new patient whose name was changed in the system midweek and never spoken aloud again, and then there was the janitor, the one who never made eye contact but always lingered too long by the staff room, the one who looked familiar but Lena couldn't quite place. She began following patterns, writing in code inside her journal, mapping names, behaviors, contradictions. It gave her a strange sense of purpose and a growing fear she was being watched. Then it happened again. Another note, this time slipped into the therapy supplies box in a blue crayon, almost childish in tone but unmistakably threatening. It read, "Some things are worse than madness. Stop asking or you'll forget again." Lena's hands shook. She didn't know if the note was meant to scare her or warn her. Both. Maybe the handwriting wasn't Jason's, it wasn't ours, it was someone else's, and that meant more than one person knew what was going on. She confronted Dr. Alden casually, asking if Jason had been discharged early. The doctor didn't blink. "No patient by that name," he said. "Not in the last 6 months." "Maybe you're misremembering," he added gently. Lena stared at him. "You admitted him." "I was there. We both were." He frowned, sympathetic, as if she were slipping again, as if this was all part of her condition. She left the room before she exploded.
That night she couldn't sleep. The dreams came back, the ones she used to have before she lost time, the ones with screaming without sound, blood without pain, faces blurred out with static only. This time she saw Jason clearly, and he wasn't screaming, he was watching behind a one-way mirror. The next morning Lena woke up early before shift and broke into the cabinet with a stolen key from the nurse's desk. She found her old files, skimmed through pages that had once felt like death sentences, and then she found a sealed envelope with her name on it. No stamp, no explanation. Inside was a photo taken through a cracked door. Jason in a white coat standing beside Dr. Reeves, not as a patient but as a colleague. The world tilted. She stared at it, her heart crawling into her throat. Jason wasn't a patient last year, he was staff, or posing as staff, or something in between. This wasn't just betrayal, it was orchestration, manipulation from inside the system. He was part of her treatment or her breakdown, or both, and no one had told her. She remembered his access, how he came and went, how the staff trusted him, how he took notes during group therapy, how he said he was just shadowing for research. It was all a lie. She tucked the photo away and closed the cabinet, slowly locking it again as her mind spun with questions. Why did he pretend to be a patient now? Was it guilt? Was it cover? Was it bait? And why did they erase the records? Who was R and what were they trying to bury? When she turned to leave, she found a note taped to the back of the cabinet door. This time it was typed, no handwriting, no signature. It read, "Stop looking or you'll end up back where we found you, cold, screaming and unmedicated." Lena didn't know whether to cry or scream. She just stood there frozen for what felt like hours. She wasn't crazy, she never had been, but she was about to start losing her mind all over again. And this time she wouldn't go quietly. Lena stared at the photo again under the harsh yellow light of the supply room. The image of Jason in a white coat beside Dr. Reeves burned into her eyes. She turned it over. No date, no note, no proof, just what her memory confirmed and what the staff continued to deny. Jason wasn't just a visitor to her past, he had been part of the team. The people who sedated her, questioned her, labeled her, broke her. That night she couldn't keep still. She walked the halls during her break, whispering to herself, reviewing what she knew like lines in a play. Jason came back as a patient, left without discharge records. She found the note under the piano. She found the photo in the locked cabinet. Now she had evidence, or something close to it, but no one believed her, not the staff, not even herself. On the worst nights, she scribbled everything in her journal, dates, reactions, names, even fragments of dream symbols she didn't understand, letters repeated over and over, RM108, and then a name she hadn't thought of in a while, Marla, the roommate she had during her second week in treatment, the one who disappeared after screaming all night about hidden microphones and walls that moved. Lena remembered they called it a manic episode, moved her to isolation. And when she returned, Marla was gone. No one spoke of her after that. She wasn't on the patient board, no goodbye, no transfer records, just gone. The next morning Lena snuck into the archives room where old case notes were filed on paper. She looked for M's surname starting from the year of her admission. Nothing matched, no Marla anywhere, just a set of files blacked out with ink or removed completely. She felt cold, like someone had erased not just a patient but a piece of reality, and now it was happening again, only this time Lena had her eyes open. At lunch she sat near Nurse Carver, who always seemed nervous around her. Lena tested it, mentioned Jason's name casually, said she hoped he was adjusting well. The nurse froze fork mid-air, then quickly forced a smile. "I don't remember that patient. Maybe you're mixing people up. It happens all the time." But her eyes said something else, something panicked and guilty. That night Lena found a drawing slid under her door. The style was familiar, detailed, obsessive, like the ones she used to make during her breakdown. It showed the hallway from the third floor, but not as it was now in the drawing. It had another door, a narrow one behind the vending machine, and next to it a name scratched in red ink. Marla was here. The handwriting matched the blue crayon note from before. She waited until 2 in the morning, then tiptoed down the hall past the sleeping staff, found the vending machine and pushed it. It didn't move at first, then she noticed scuff marks on the floor, faint but there. The machine was on wheels, locked into a bracket. She tugged the base hard, heart racing, and it rolled slightly enough to reveal a panel the size of a door. It was painted over, but a small dent showed where a handle once was. She pried at the corner and felt it give way. Cold air breathed out, and a metallic smell hit her like rust and chemicals. She pulled out her phone for light and stepped inside. It was a narrow passage lined with files and storage bins, most labeled with meaningless codes, until she saw one marked RM108. Archive. She opened it and found pictures, therapy logs, sketches, hers, Jason's, Marla's, and others she didn't recognize. She flipped through them, shaking. Names had been blacked out, details erased, but the notes were real evaluations of patients who had suffered after exposure to controlled psychological triggers designed by the facility as part of an off-the-books research trial. It wasn't therapy, it was testing. She heard a sound behind her, a click, soft, deliberate. She turned, but no one was there. The hallway behind the vending machine was empty, but the vending machine had rolled back into place. She was trapped. Panic rose like bile. She slammed her hands against the door, called out. Nothing happened. She checked her phone. No signal, just one bar flickering, then gone. She sat on the floor, breathing hard, trying not to scream. The air was dry, electric, and she felt the walls close in. After what felt like an hour, she heard it again, a click, and then the machine rolled slightly. Someone was opening it from the other side. A hand reached and grabbed her, pulled her out roughly, and she saw who it was. Dr. Alden, his face calm but his eyes cold. He didn't speak, just took her by the arm and led her down the hallway. Lena didn't resist. She was too stunned. He brought her to her old room, the one she hadn't seen since her last breakdown. And inside, the lights were off, the bed was stripped, and the walls were blank. He finally spoke. "You shouldn't have gone in there." Lena tried to steady her voice. "What is this place? What did you do to us?" He sighed. "You're not well. You're remembering things that don't exist. This happens sometimes after long-term care. Trauma confuses timelines." "That's not true," she snapped. "I have proof." She reached into her pocket, but the folder was gone. Her heart sank. He held up the file slowly. "You mean this? It's been confiscated for your safety. We don't want you relapsing." "I'm not relapsing," she shouted, but it felt hollow. Her hands shook, her mouth dry. He stepped forward, his tone soft, almost kind. "It's time to rest, Lena. You've been under a lot of stress and you're starting to invent things again. Let us help you." She backed away. "I know about Marla. I know Jason wasn't just a visitor. He was staff or something worse, and I know you're covering this up." Alden's eyes flickered. He said nothing, just pressed the intercom behind him, and two aides appeared within seconds. She fought them, but they were strong. They dragged her back to the staff med room where a familiar blue chair waited, one she hadn't seen in a year. They strapped her down gently, like always, soothing voices saying, "This is for your safety. Just breathe, just breathe." The needle came next, something sharp and cool, and then the blur started, her mind slowing, her words slurring. She tried to fight it, but it washed over her like a wave, stealing the edges of thought, but not the center. This time she would not forget, not again. She focused on one word, Jason. She said it aloud until it faded from her lips and the room went dark. She woke hours later, or maybe days, she couldn't tell, in a quiet room with soft music playing. Her wrists were sore from the restraints, her mouth tasted like metal. She sat up slowly, dizzy, lightheaded, and looked around. The room was unfamiliar, not her old room, not the med ward. It looked like a recovery suite, nicer furniture, softer lights, flowers on the table. A nurse appeared with a smile. "How are we feeling today, Lena?" "What happened?" she asked, trying to sound alert. "Just a little episode, nothing to worry about. You're in the East Wing now for rest." Lena didn't respond. She stared out the window, thinking this was another layer of control, another cage, only prettier. But she wasn't the same girl they'd locked up last year. Later that night, when the nurse left, she found another note taped behind the bathroom mirror. This one was written in her own handwriting, but she had no memory of writing it. It said, "If you're reading this, they've sedated you again. Don't trust Alden or Reeves. Jason is part of it. They erase files, hide patients, test reactions. Marla didn't disappear. She broke protocol and they silenced her. Trust no one but yourself. Follow the red triangles." Red triangles. She looked around. Nothing. Then under the sink a small triangle scratched in red pen on the wood grain, then another near the vent. They were everywhere, hidden, faint but present, leading towards something, and she knew what she had to do. They hadn't broken her, not yet. The red triangle under the sink had been scratched with something sharp, maybe a pen, maybe a key. Lena stared at it, her mind still foggy from the sedative, but the note in her handwriting that she didn't remember writing kept replaying in her mind. Follow the red triangles. It was a breadcrumb trail, and she was going to follow it even if it led straight into hell. She waited until the second shift change, when the hallway outside the East Wing went quiet, then slipped out in her socks. No badge, no ID, only the red mark etched into her memory. The next triangle was near the exit sign above the stairwell, so faint you'd miss it unless you were looking. She climbed the stairs 2 floors up and stopped outside a maintenance door. Another triangle, this one fresher, as if someone had been here recently. She pushed the door open slowly. It led into a crawl space behind the wall panels, pipes, wires, the smell of dust and bleach. She squeezed through, careful not to scrape her skin on the nails sticking out, and followed the narrow path, ducking low, until she saw a flicker of movement ahead, a shadow, someone waiting. She almost turned back, but the voice stopped her. "Lena," it whispered, low but urgent. She crept closer and saw a figure crouched by the wall, flashlight in hand. It was the janitor, the one who always lingered outside staff rooms, the one with the 2 familiar eyes. "I knew you'd find this place," he said softly, holding out his hand. She didn't take it. "Who are you?" she asked. "I was patient 0, he replied. Before she could respond, he continued, "They tested the triangle system on me. It was a failsafe in case I ever remembered too much. You're not supposed to see them. They're for people like us, the ones who weren't supposed to survive what they did here." She sat down across from him, feeling her knees shake. What did they do? He leaned closer, face grim. Experiments, memory suppression, trauma reinduction. They said it was for advanced psychiatric studies, but it was all about control, breaking people, rebuilding them, seeing how far they could push before the mind snapped. And Jason, she asked, her voice hard. He looked away. Jason was one of them. He wasn't always a doctor. They recruited him from the inside. He pretended to be a patient in the beginning, got close to people like you and me, learned how we cracked, then turned it into data. Lena felt her stomach turn. He was watching me even then. He nods. You weren't the only one. Why are you helping me? She asked. Because you're the only one who got out and came back, he replied quietly. They wiped us clean, or so they thought, but some memories don't stay buried, and you remembering means maybe we can end this before more people disappear. He led her through a back corridor to a storage closet he unlocked. With a broken ID badge inside were boxes of files, photos, hand-drawn maps, all marked with symbols she couldn't decode. This is what I've collected, he said, since I woke up 3 months ago. They tried to make me forget again, but I pretended, played along. Now I know their cycle. Every 6 months they bring in a new round and start over. Marla was part of the last round. She figured out too much too fast. They took her down to the basement level. I don't know what happened to her after that, but I heard her scream once through the vents. It didn't sound human. Lena clenched her fists. What's on the basement level? He shook his head. No one goes down there, not patients, not real staff. It's locked off, but there's another way in, through the laundry chute. It's dangerous, and if they catch you, you'll never be seen again. She nodded. I have to try. He looked at her, eyes heavy. You'll need this. He handed her a small recorder and a paperclip bent into a crude lockpick. Record everything. Don't trust anyone, and whatever happens, if you see the red room, run. She returned to her room just before dawn, heart racing, sweat cold on her back. She hid the recorder inside a sanitary pad wrapper, something no one would check, then slipped the lockpick under the edge of her mattress. The next day Dr. Alden visited her with a clipboard and a smile. How are we today? Lena, feeling more rested. She forced a smile. Better, thank you for the rest. He studied her for a moment, too long, then nodded. Good, we're going to resume light group therapy this afternoon. Let's keep things calm and productive. She nodded and watched him leave. At group therapy she sat quietly observing. Jason was still gone or hiding, but the other patients looked strange, their eyes distant, speech slow, too synchronized like rehearsed lines. One of them, a girl named Kelsey, leaned toward her and whispered, you blink a lot when you lie. Lena froze. Excuse me. Kelsey smiled eerily. Just saying you shouldn't blink so much when you're hiding things. They noticed. She turned away before Lena could reply. That night Lena followed the janitor's map to the laundry chute on the east wing, used the paperclip to pop the maintenance lock, and slid down the metal shaft, praying it wouldn't echo too loud. She landed in a pile of sheets and garbage, then crawled into the shadows. She clicked on the recorder and whispered, date, time, location, red triangle, protocol, initiate, subject Lena H. And then she moved through the basement hallway lit by flickering overhead lights. The air smelled like metal and mold and something worse, something rotten. She found a door marked R-Wing, unauthorized entry prohibited, red triangle carved into the doorframe. She pushed it open quietly. Inside were rooms with two-way mirrors, empty chairs and restraints, overturned papers, a wall of photos connected by red string. Some were scratched out, others marked with codes. One photo was hers, circled in red, underneath written in Jason's handwriting, case subject 113, reactive, high potential. She backed away and kept moving. At the end of the hallway was another door, this one solid steel but unlocked. Behind it a staircase that descended into blackness. She hesitated, then started down, whispering to the recorder, subject entering lower level, presumed restricted, Jason Carter, identity confirmed as staff collaborator, involvement unknown, Dr. Reeves likely lead architect of memory trials, Lena H. possible breach risk, attempting to locate patient Marla last seen in R-Wing, pre-expulsion protocol. She reached the bottom of the stairs and gasped. The hallway was coated in red light, the walls lined with soundproofing foam, the hum of machines behind closed doors. One door was slightly open. She peeked inside and saw Marla strapped to a gurney, wires in her arms, eyes open but vacant, staring at the ceiling. Monitors beeped quietly. A voice from the intercom said, initiate test pattern 4, and suddenly Marla's body jerked. Her mouth opened in a silent scream. Lena stepped back, hand over her mouth. She was about to enter when a voice behind her said, you shouldn't be here. She turned slowly and found Jason standing in the hallway, wearing his white coat again, not the patient version, the real one, his expression unreadable. You've seen too much, Lena, you need to come with me now. She shook her head, backing away. I know what you did, what you're still doing. He sighed. I tried to protect you, believe it or not. I kept your records out of phase. I told them you weren't a good candidate for long-term experimentation, but you kept digging, and now they'll use you to finish what they started. You lied to me, you used me, you said you loved me. Her voice cracked and the words hurt more coming out than she expected. He looked genuinely pained. I did love you in my way, but love doesn't survive here, not when we're all just pieces on a board. Now come or they'll come for both of us. She hesitated, then lunged forward, hitting the emergency override button on the wall. Alarms blared, red lights flashed, and Jason shouted, "No, you don't know what you've done." She ran through the hallway, ducking into a side door and slamming it shut behind her. She recorded everything, her breath, her heartbeat, the screams echoing down the hall, and Marla's voice faint but real, help me please." She found a maintenance ladder, climbed fast, her hands slipping on the metal until she reached the top, burst through a hatch into the East Wing laundry room and collapsed panting on the floor. A nurse found her minutes later, wide-eyed and shaking. They sedated her again, but not before she shoved the recorder into the nurse's pocket, whispering 2 words, "Play it." As the drug pulled her under, she heard voices shouting, confusion, chaos, then the sound of the recorder crackling to life. Then nothing. Lena awoke to the sound of soft humming and the scent of lavender oil. Someone had placed a diffuser near her bed and the lights above were dimmed. She blinked slowly, unsure of how long she had been unconscious, but her mouth was dry, her arms sore, and her thoughts scrambled. Her hand moved beneath the blanket, instinctively feeling for the recorder, but it was gone. She sat up and looked around the room. This wasn't the East Wing, it wasn't any part of the facility she remembered. It looked more like a hotel suite, a beige armchair near the window, fake plants on the desk, even the bedspread had a floral pattern that didn't belong in a place that sedated and restrained people. She stood up, wobbled to the mirror, and saw herself pale, thinner than she remembered, her eyes bloodshot, her lips cracked. The door behind her creaked open and Dr. Reeves stepped inside without knocking, holding a cup of warm tea. "You've been through quite the ordeal," the doctor said, her voice gentle as always. Lena didn't respond. "Where am I?" she asked. Reeves placed the tea on the table and sat in the armchair. "This is a neutral space for stabilization. Patients who have experienced psychological breaks are sometimes moved here after incidents in high-risk zones." "You mean after I exposed your experiments?" Reeves tilted her head. "You're confused again, Lena, but that's normal. Memory dissonance is expected after extreme delusions." "I wasn't hallucinating," Lena snapped. "I saw Marla. She's alive. She's being tortured down there. And Jason, he was never a patient." Reeves sighed. "Jason has been reassigned. He's no longer on your case for your safety." And Lena's fists clenched. "What about the recorder? The nurse heard it, didn't she?" Reeves stood and walked to the door. "You need rest. We can talk more tomorrow. Everything's going to be fine now." The door clicked shut and Lena paced the room, her mind catching up to what her body already knew. This wasn't recovery, it was containment. There were no cameras, but there didn't need to be. She was isolated, boxed in, cleaned up just enough to be forgotten. She tried the windows, locked. She checked the drawers, empty. The vents were too small to crawl through, and there was no clock, no way to track time. But something had changed. They were nervous. The next day Reeves returned with a therapist. Lena didn't recognize a younger woman named Dr. Mara Grant, who smiled warmly and sat close on the couch. "I've been assigned to your support team," Dr. Grant said. "Your previous therapist had to step away for personal reasons. I'm here to help." Lena nodded slowly, watching her gestures, her posture, her too perfect smile. "I'd like to help you too," Lena said. "I'd like to remember everything." They began daily sessions, each one calmer than the last. Lena played the part. She answered questions, admitted confusion, described invented dreams about gardens and forgiveness. She even cried on cue, sometimes saying she was sorry for causing disruption, but inside she was waiting. On the 4th day something arrived. A small note taped under the toilet lid in shaky handwriting. It read, "Played it, they no stall." The nurse had heard it. Lena tore the note into pieces, flushed it, then went back to her bed, her heart racing. Someone had listened, someone had doubts. Now she needed more. She began requesting materials to help her heal, art supplies, access to books, soft music for meditation. They allowed it under supervision. She painted slowly, abstract shapes, mostly reds and blacks, and hidden within them she left new messages. "Help me look closer below, paint hidden files, Jason. Marla, proof." By the end of the week Lena noticed things shifting. Dr. Grant asked fewer questions about hallucinations and more about memories. "What do you remember about your childhood? What does safety mean to you? When did you first feel betrayed?" Lena answered all of them thoughtfully, strategically, knowing they were watching her for signs of instability, waiting for her to slip. Then during one session Grant hesitated and finally asked, "Tell me about Jason." Lena stiffened and then leaned back, breathing deeply. "He loved me in the beginning, or maybe he pretended to. I can't tell anymore. He told me once that pain is the fastest way to truth." She paused, her voice cracking. "He was right. Dr. Grant nodded slowly, scribbled something down and then looked at her carefully. Do you remember what you recorded? Lena blinked. No, only that I had to document it or no one would ever believe me. Grant leaned in. What if I told you someone leaked it? Lena sat upright. What? Grant pulled a phone from her pocket, set it on the table face down and whispered, they're trying to contain it but the file's already been sent beyond the network. Someone from the outside has it now. Lena's breath caught in her throat. What happens now? You disappear, Grant said softly, or they make you disappear unless you do it first. That night Lena waited until lights out, then moved to the vent near the floor. She had been loosening it with a paperclip hidden in her book spine for days now. Finally it gave way enough for her to crawl through the narrow shaft, cutting her elbows and knees until she reached a vertical drop with a service ladder. She climbed down into the maintenance hallway below and crept toward the staff access door. She swiped the ID card she had stolen from Grant's coat pocket earlier that day when she had leaned in for a hug, and to her relief it worked. The door buzzed open and she stepped into the west wing near the staff communication center. She kept to the shadows, ducking past two aides, and slipped into the back room filled with computers, printers and filing cabinets. She searched the drawers until she found a locked box labeled Incident Records. She picked it open with shaking fingers, and there was a printed transcript of her recording, logged by date and tagged with a note in red ink: intercepted media breach level 3, unknown external recipient, initiate sweep. She stuffed the transcript into her hoodie and turned to leave, but a figure blocked the doorway. It was Jason, no lab coat this time, just a black shirt, eyes darker than she remembered. He didn't speak for a long time, then finally said, I told you they'd never let you leave. Lena looked at him, eyes burning. You were supposed to protect me. Jason stepped closer. I tried to, but once you started asking questions I couldn't stop them. You were never meant to remember. Lena shook her head, voice rising. You drugged me, erased me, made me believe I was broken. You are broken, Jason said softly. We all are. That's why they chose us in the first place. Lena pushed past him and ran. Alarms started to ring somewhere distant, or maybe just in her head. She didn't stop. She burst out of the west wing into the garden, sprinted past the fences and reached the old greenhouse where she had once hidden during a blackout. Inside someone was waiting. It was the janitor again, older, eyes wild but steady. He grabbed her arm, pulled her down behind the crates and whispered, they're coming. You have to go now. Where? She asked. He handed her a phone. Press 2. It's all set. They'll come for you and then it's out of our hands. What about Marla? He looked down, voice low. She didn't make it. They used her to refine the test. Her brain hemorrhaged last week. I saw the file. Lena swallowed hard, nodded once and pressed the number. The phone rang twice, then a voice answered. Tell me everything. The voice on the other end of the phone was calm, older male, clipped accent, professional, not surprised at all, as if he had been expecting the call. Lena took a deep breath and spoke fast, clear, detailed names, dates, everything she remembered from her time inside the facility, everything she saw, everything she recorded, including the experiment codes, the hidden red rooms, Jason, Marla, and what they did to the patients. The voice listened quietly, occasionally saying go on or slow down, then at the end simply said stay exactly where you are, and hung up. Lena froze for a moment, still crouched behind crates in the old greenhouse, heart pounding louder than her breath. The janitor placed a small metal object in her hand, a chipped badge from a defunct wing, then handed her a black hoodie and gloves. They'll look for you in your uniform, he said, then pointed to the storm drain behind the building. Crawl through it. It comes out behind the south fence. There's a shed inside. You'll find a bike. Ride north until you see a yellow mailbox. Wait there. Someone will come. She grabbed his hand tightly, whispered thank you, and slipped into the drain. Cold, muddy air, thick and damp. Her knees scraped raw, her fingers numb from the wet metal sides, but she crawled fast, guided only by faint light at the far end and the sound of distant alarms behind her. Her exit was near the back perimeter, no cameras in sight. The janitor had known every blind spot. She found the shed just as he'd said, rusted walls, creaking door, and inside a single red bicycle with flat handlebars, duct tape on the seat, no brakes. She got on anyway, rode hard, feet pounding against the pedals, teeth clenched, wind slicing her cheeks, the night air carrying the scent of smoke and wet pine. She didn't look back. When she reached the yellow mailbox, a black SUV was already waiting, tinted windows, engine running. The passenger door opened and the man from the phone stepped out, dressed in gray slacks, leather gloves, short silver hair. He didn't give a name, just opened the door. Get in now. She hesitated for half a second, then climbed inside. They drove in silence for what felt like hours before stopping at a remote safe house nestled in the woods near a reservoir. Inside, warm lights, clean couch, security monitors already blinking with feeds from outside. The man handed her tea and sat across from her. This is a temporary hold, he said. We don't know who's clean yet. Lena didn't ask who he was or who he worked for. Government watchdogs, private investigators, journalists, nothing. made sense anymore, but one thing was clear: the truth was out and someone powerful was trying to keep it buried. He showed her footage from the facility just days prior: Marla's gurney being wheeled down a hallway, her vitals flatlined, Reeves signing off on a death certificate marked cardiac event but no autopsy requested. Another video showed Jason speaking with a man in a black trench coat outside a side door, handing over a file labeled R series marked classified. "There's more," the man said. "We decrypted the file. You were listed as RS-6, last viable subject, memory resistance above average, response to emotional pressure high. They were planning to wipe you again within 72 hours. Lena looked away, jaw clenched. "They nearly did." He handed her a USB drive. "We're sending this to every major network by morning, but there will be blowback. They'll smear you, say you're unstable, unwell, vengeful. It's not over, not even close." "I know," she said quietly, "but they killed Marla. They erased me, and Jason is still out there." "Then fight," he said. "Expose them piece by piece or disappear and start over. Your choice, but make it now, because after this there's no coming back." She stared at the drive in her hand, her reflection faint in its black surface. Somewhere inside it was everything they tried to take from her: the screams, the machines, the silence between sedations, the way Jason said her name just before they wiped her the first time. She took a long breath. "I want to finish it. I want the world to know." She stood up, shoulders square. "Where do we start?" The man smiled grimly. "You already did." They launched the leak in phases: first a private drop to selected journalists, whistleblower protection groups, human rights attorneys, then a public release on underground forums. Encrypted with her voice narrating the original recording, every word, followed by medical records, patient logs and photos of the facility inside. 10 hours the story had broken wide open and her name was everywhere. Survivor of illegal psychiatric trials. Patient turned whistleblower. Girl who escaped the Red Wing. She watched the coverage in silence, her photo blurred in most clips, her voice altered in podcasts, her words quoted in headlines, some supportive, others skeptical, a few outright calling it a conspiracy, and she knew they'd try to erase it all eventually, but it was out there now and she wasn't done. 2 days later she got a message on a secure line. A woman's voice said, "I was there too before you. They buried my file. I have proof. Meet me." She didn't say her name, didn't give a location, just coordinates. Lena hesitated but followed them into a broken train yard where she found a woman, maybe 40, thin, nervous, missing a thumb on one hand. Said her name was Elise. Elise handed her a stack of letters, sealed journals from the early trials, photos of patients no one had mentioned, including a child, maybe 12, who had electrodes on his temples, his face blank. Elise whispered, "They started with kids back then, said they were helping trauma recovery. It was a lie, always a lie." Lena took the files, scanned them, sent them to her contact, who confirmed dates that matched the earliest experiments long before the public ever heard of the clinic. Each day the truth spread a little more. Each day more people came forward with pieces of a puzzle too big for any one person to hold. And then the message came. Jason had vanished. No trace, no digital footprint, no transfer files. Even the footage of his final shift at the facility was scrubbed clean. Facial recognition showed a ghost in his place. Lena knew what that meant. They had buried him. Or worse, he was still operating under a different name in a new place, starting over with new patients, new trials, and no one watching. Lena stared at his photo one last time, the one from years ago when they were still lovers, still broken versions of something resembling whole. Her fingers hovered over the image, then deleted it. She didn't need to see him anymore. What mattered now was what she'd do next. The man returned with a folder, this time marked Global Licenses Inspection Team. He said, "This is how you bury them legally. We found shell companies, dozens of them, all connected. We can freeze them if you testify publicly." "You mean if I put my face on it?" "Yes." She nodded slowly, then looked out the window. The forest was quiet, moon hanging low. "I'll do it, but on my terms." She turned back, eyes sharp. "I speak the truth, nothing else, and I name every name I remember." It aired 3 weeks later. A live feed, 1 hour uninterrupted, her story raw, unedited, her voice breaking once as she spoke of Marla. Her body still never returned, and again as she described waking up to a memory that didn't belong to her. She told the world about love and betrayal, about trust and control, about what happens when people with too much power decide who deserves healing and who becomes an experiment. And when it ended, the screen went black, then white, and a single sentence appeared. The truth was never supposed to survive. But it had. Lena stood beneath the stage lights, her eyes scanning the sea of silent faces, cameras blinking, 1,000 tiny eyes watching her, breathing her truth live and unfiltered. Her hands didn't tremble, her voice didn't crack. She had told them everything, and now the world would decide what to do with it. The interview went viral overnight. The hashtags filled the internet. Survivor not subject, Redwing Truth justice for patients. Her voice became the voice of dozens, then hundreds. Survivors came forward, nurses, staff, ex-guards, even one technician who had rigged the memory wipe machines. They all said the same thing: we thought we were helping, we thought they were healing them, we were wrong. Governments launched inquiries, licensing boards revoked permits. 3 top executives at the parent corporation resigned within a week. Reeves was placed on investigative leave pending trial. The facility was locked down, frozen in red tape, its name scrubbed from signs. The gates closed for the first time in 17 years. But Jason was still gone. No trace. Not even a whisper in the deep forums or black site chatter. Lena kept digging night after night, shifting through networks, proxies, hidden VPN calls, until finally she found it. A signature pattern in a fund transfer logged by a dummy nonprofit linked to a new research center in Argentina under a different name, but the language in the grant request was familiar: high resilience, low empathy, exploratory psychiatric thresholds, and the lead medical officer had no public history, no photo, just initials. J.D. She didn't hesitate. She booked a one-way flight under a new identity, arrived in Buenos Aires alone, took a taxi 6 hours north, and rented a car to drive the last stretch into a forested valley where the new facility waited. Clean walls, polished glass, smiling guards who waved her in with a badge she had hacked from the board's old database. Inside it was almost identical to the original, red hallways, soft music, reinforced doors with number codes, except here they were careful, very clean, very polite. She asked to tour the outpatient wing, said she was considering enrollment for her cousin, showed false medical letters, dressed in muted beige, her hair pulled back, thick glasses to shadow her face. She slipped away near the west stairwell when the nurse wasn't looking, opened a maintenance door and descended into the lower levels where the light dimmed and the air thinned, and she knew she was close. Room after room filled with machines, humming, wires, tubes, half-full notebooks marked Trial 1, Trial 2, and a locked cabinet stamped Confidential. She cracked it open and found a folder thick with names, patients' IDs, birth dates, test results, and at the bottom a list titled Acceptable Losses with 3 columns: name, method, status. Some were marked relocated, some were terminated, a few were marked unknown. Marla's name was there. So was her own. Next to hers it read non-compliant, status unconfirmed. She took a photo of every page, slipped the folder into her coat and turned to leave. That's when she heard the voice. "You always did have trouble staying gone." Jason stepped into the doorway, calm, clean, a soft smile on his lips. He looked unchanged, as if years hadn't passed, not a wrinkle or gray hair. He wore a white coat again, ID badge clipped neatly, eyes just as dark as she remembered. "You knew I'd come," she said quietly. "Of course," he replied, "you always had to see the ending." "This is the ending," she said, holding up the file, "this and everything else you hid." He stepped forward, hands raised, easy, slow, and yet somehow dangerous. "You think they'll believe it again? You think truth matters more than fear? This place is different, Lena. I made it better, safer. No more memory wipes, no more shock therapies, just pure observation. We learn from them, now we don't touch them. But you still experiment." "We all do," he said softly, "so do you." She shook her head. "I came to end it this time for good." He moved closer. "Maybe you came because part of you understands what we did. Maybe you saw what they did with your file after the leak. Maybe you realized that out there you'll always be a victim, a broken woman. In here you have purpose." "You think I want purpose like this?" she whispered. "I think you miss the clarity," he said. "You miss the pain because it's real and everything else is shadows." She pulled out her phone, pressed send. Every image, every document, every recording from that file went live. A second later, uploaded to 3 cloud backups, 3 encrypted emails to journalists already waiting. Jason looked at her for a long time, then laughed quietly, softly. "You never did know when to stop." "You never did know when I started," she replied. Then she stepped forward, lifted the taser she had hidden beneath her coat, and fired. He dropped instantly, convulsing, eyes wide, silent, scream. She walked past him, slow, steady, heart calm. Up the stairs, through the emergency exit, past the parking lot, into the car. She drove until dawn, until the sun rose behind her and the building was just a fading shape in the mirror. 2 days later the second wave of leaks hit the networks, bigger than the first. Proof of active trials, proof of suppressed deaths, patient testimonies, hidden burial records, and one final image that burned across every news feed. Jason's ID photo clipped beside a live shot of him unconscious on the facility floor, dates stamped, tagged with the words Project Director. This time no one could bury it. The government froze all affiliated programs within hours. Warrants were issued. Interpol stepped in. Investigators raided 3 more centers in 2 other countries, and Lena watched it all from a small house near the ocean, waves hitting the shore, wind cutting through open windows, where she slept with no pills, no beeping monitors, no hands around her wrists. She sat on the porch one morning holding Marla's old scarf, the one they took from her room that she found again in the final facility, tucked in a drawer with initials sewn into the edge. She tied it around her wrist like armor. She wasn't healed, not fully, not yet, maybe never. But she wasn't broken anymore. She had taken the truth back. And this time, she kept it.